face the camera, just wait real quick. Okay. So my speech is about policies and procedures in the workplace. So I'll begin right now. A company without effective policies and procedures implemented and taught is a company doomed to fail in the end. I'm here to discuss and present the policies and procedures of the Club at Carlton Woods. Knowing your company policies and procedures helps keep you on track to being an efficient worker and having overall success in the company, whether you're just a normal employee or you're the owner. I've worked here at the club for over a year and a half under two different managing companies, the first being Howard Hughes Woodlands Company, and we are now owned by Insperity. I will discuss with you today the current policies and procedures of Carlton Woods, the effective and ineffectiveness of these policies, and the possible solutions to said policies. To begin, I will list and explain the policies of the club. All companies must have policies and procedures that all employees, hourly all the way up to the owners, must follow in order to have a productive and efficient workplace. Like all companies, Carlton Woods has several policies and procedures in place that all of the employees must abide by. Among them are anti-harassment, weapons, a drug-free workplace, equal employment opportunity, family and medical leave, and then also guidelines for appropriate conduct. So before we'll discuss, the anti-harassment pretty much tells you what constitutes as harassment, what to deal, or I guess what's involved with a dispute between whether it's one of your coworkers or it's one of you, so how basically all that's settled, and so how to go through all that, and that harassment in the workplace is also never tolerated. A drug-free workplace policy pretty much says that any kind of drug, whether illegal or it's alcohol or whatever, if you've got a prescription for something, it's not allowed to be on the premises of the workplace. You cannot be in possession of it. You can't be, giving it around to people, and you can't be under the influence at work. Guidelines to appropriate conduct. That one's pretty straightforward. It talks about you need to make sure you have proper hygiene at work, you dress appropriately in your uniform, and you don't do anything that would harm you, the others that you work with, the members of the club, or the club itself. And then the weapons in the workplace policy pretty much says that weapons are not allowed on the premises. It doesn't matter who you are, unless you're the security at the gates. They're the only ones that are allowed to carry weapons on the premises. And so, now that we know the policies that are set in place, we can now go into the effectiveness and ineffectiveness of these policies. So just because you have policies set in place at work doesn't mean that they will actually be followed by everybody, because some people just don't like to follow the rules. So not only do you need to put policies in effect, you need them to be effective, and that's not going to happen if they're not enforced on a daily basis. If they're not, they're completely useless, and there's going to be a lot of negative side effects that are going to go along with this. From my experience of a year and a half there at the club, I can say that overall our policies they're very straightforward, and they've all been effective. We haven't really had any problems with drugs in the workplace. Any harassment and violence issues in the workplace have been settled and dealt with immediately, whether those people were fired on the spot or just sent home so that things could kind of cool off at work. And same thing with the violence. Everything's been dealt with appropriately, and the policies are understood throughout the club along with the employees and the members of the club. The only policy that I've ever noticed that wasn't very clear or effective is the disciplinary actions for mistakes, choices, or issues with the employees. So mistakes are a part of everyday life and happen in the workplace all the time, but some of them, especially some of the more serious things that have happened there, just were not dealt with appropriately. But some of them, especially if repeated, require action to be taken. For example, last year there was a huge event during one of my brother's birthday. And so it was my day off, and I was home with the family to celebrate the day with them and all of our friends. Later on in the evening, I got a text from a coworker saying if I don't show up to work as soon as possible to help one of our other valleys that we have there, that I would be fired on the spot. And he apparently said that our manager said the same thing, so that was just coming from him. After arguing with them for about an hour or so, I dropped what I was doing and went to work. Upon my arrival, the Valley, who apparently needed help, and then also my manager was at the stand with them, they looked very surprised to see me, so they had no idea that I was even headed up there, and they weren't expecting to see me all night. So basically, the coworker who told me that I needed to show up as soon as possible had lied to me and said that I was going to get fired all for nothing. And so I just showed up to work stressed out. I'm already angry because I didn't need to be there. None of this was communicated to me from one of the managers. So this isn't the first time I've had a problem like this with him, and he should have been fired or at least written up for what had happened, but apparently all that happened was him and my manager had a talk the following day or whatever his next shift was. So I don't think that was really fair. I think in that case he probably should have gotten in a lot of trouble. And then I believe I later on found out that he was written up at the time, but he didn't get in as much trouble as he should have, or something like that. When things like that occur and happen in the workplace and they're not dealt with properly, the same things will continue to happen without any consequences. If someone keeps doing the same mistake and they're not getting into trouble for it, or someone's not getting onto them about it, I mean, they're just going to keep doing the same thing. And that's exactly what this guy was doing. He kept lying to people and kind of kept, maneuvering and doing things like that. And the same thing would just happen every time. The managers would just blow it off. So after talking about the effectiveness of our company policies, I will talk about possible solutions to fixing the ineffective policy. The example I just used is just one of the many problems that have occurred during my employment here. Most people aren't written up or fired when they should have been, either because they talked the manager out of it, the managers forgot about it, which that happens more often than anything, or the club managers weren't hard enough on them. This needs to stop, and there should be consequences for the things that people do. So what I suggest in order to fix some of these things, I think, first of all, take care of the situation as soon as possible. So if something happens right then and there, it needs to be addressed right then and there. I mean, I know there are some circumstances where their club is just super packed, super busy, and we can't exactly deal with things on the spot right then and there. But it needs to be addressed as soon as we possibly can so that the matter's taken care of and it won't happen again, hopefully. The second one is take appropriate action. So if someone screws up horribly, or especially if someone generally makes mistakes all the time, whether they're serious or not, something needs to be done about it. Now, if someone keeps making huge screw-ups, then I think they need to be written up for whatever their action was, or they should probably be let go to keep from further things from going on. Managers should also be more stern and strict. One of the problems that I've had at my job where the managers generally aren't strict enough. And I mean, if something happens, they mostly just blow it off. They're just like, just don't do it again, whatever. And that's pretty much it. I think they need to be a lot stricter. And if something happens, whether it's a small mistake or not, some sort of action needs to be taken to where it's just a verbal warning. They start scheduling you less and less. They give you less hours so that you know that you did something wrong. They need to let you know. Which brings me to my fourth point, which we need more feedback, whether it's going to be positive or negative. If we're doing something right, I think they need to let us know so we don't go out and start making mistakes. And especially if we're doing something that we shouldn't be doing, we need to be told that so that we don't care, so we can prevent that from happening in the future. So the example I just used was one of the many problems that have happened here. We can't have a bunch of pushovers as bosses because sometimes they just blow it off, like I've said. They just forget about it. They don't take the appropriate action that's needed. If someone messes up pretty badly, like the other valley, a write-up is definitely, I think, should be the proper action taken. If it was a very small mistake, a small consequence should be administered. If someone keeps making the same mistake, then, like I said about the less hours or write-up, or a meeting with the managers, kind of say, hey, this is what's going on and we need it to be fixed. When a system for dealing with these things is made, managers should be consistent with what is done. So they can't discipline you for that thing the one day and then another day you make the same mistake and they don't do anything about it. It needs to be consistent. Everyone should be held accountable for their own actions and deal with the consequences accordingly. So they, you need to take responsibility for your actions. With a more consistent and not laid-back system, people will get a better idea of what not to do and then do the right thing. With a better policy implementation concerning consequences, people will stop making the same mistakes and people, along with the club, can become more efficient. After talking about possible solutions, I can conclude my speech. To conclude what I've talked about today, we went over the policies of Carlton Woods, the effectiveness and ineffectiveness of those policies, and possible solutions to the ineffective policies. It's always important to make and implement effective policies in the workplace, and if there ever comes a time where one or more of said policies becomes ineffective and becomes a problem, doesn't really fix anything, then new policies must be made so that mistakes are dealt with. A company without effective policies will never run right and will surely fail in the end.